Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into the future? You know how we always talk about how fast technology is changing? Well, today we're going to explore how that could completely transform what it means to be human.
Oh, yeah, this should be interesting.
It all started with this article, right? By Bill Joy, the co-founder of Sun Microsystems.
Yeah.
And he really makes you think about the implications of robotics, genetic engineering, and nanotechnology.
He calls him GNR, right?
Exactly, GNR. And the thing is, they all have this crazy potential to self-replicate. Yeah, I mean, just imagine our own inventions could actually end up being our downfall.
It's a pretty wild thought, right?
So what makes Joy's argument so different? Like, what makes these technologies so unique compared to what we've seen before?
It really comes down to this whole self-replication thing. He says it's like a bomb is blown up only once, but one bot can become many and quickly get out of control. You see what I mean? It's a total game changer.
Okay, so walk me through this. What exactly is self-replication, and why is it such a big deal? I mean, I get the robot part, but how does that apply to genetic engineering and nanotechnology?
Think of it like nature, right? Like viruses or bacteria. They're pros at self-replication.
Oh, right. And
Yeah.
sometimes that leads to problems, like pandemics.
Exactly. And now, think about giving that same power to machines or engineered organisms. It's like we're putting evolution on hyperspeed.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So instead of a few robots or modified organisms, we could suddenly have tons of them.
Yeah, and even more than that, we might not even be able to control them. Joy mentions this guy, Stuart Kaufman, who discovered self-replicating peptides.
Okay.
And basically what that means is self-replication might be even more fundamental than we thought, way harder to contain.
So in a perfect world, maybe these self-replicating robots could, like, clean up pollution or something.
Uh-huh.
But then there's the flip side, the whole what if things go wrong scenario. And to be honest, that's kind of what I'm really interested in, the dystopian stuff.
Well, Joy definitely doesn't sugarcoat the potential risks. Like, one of the scariest things he talks about is this whole robotic takeover scenario.
Oh, right. Like in all those sci-fi movies where the machines decide humans are, obsolete. Suddenly not so excited about my robot vacuum cleaner.
It's not just sci-fi, though. You know Hans Moravec. He's a big-time roboticist, and he's actually compared what could happen to humans to what happened to those marsupials in South America.
Oh, right. When those placental mammals showed up.
Yeah. They basically just got outcompeted and driven to extinction.
So basically, instead of a meteor wiping us out, it's our own creations. Not the most cheerful thought. But I have a feeling robot overlords aren't the only thing we should be worried about, are they?
You're right, there's more. Joy talks about this concept called knowledge-enabled mass destruction. He calls it KMD.
Okay, knowledge-enabled mass destruction. KMD. That sounds pretty ominous. What is that exactly? Like, what's a knowledge-based weapon?
It's not like a physical weapon, you know? It's more like the knowledge itself becomes the weapon, like the blueprints, the formulas, or the code.
I think I'm starting to get it. So it's
Mhm.
not about having a nuclear bomb. It's about knowing how to build one. And now I'm starting to get seriously scared.
The worst part is, unlike those old-school weapons of mass destruction, the knowledge for GNR is just spreading like wildfire. Imagine a world where anyone who knows enough could just engineer a deadly virus or unleash these nanobots that can replicate themselves.
Wait a second. Nanobots? You mean those tiny microscopic machines everyone's been talking about?
Those are the ones. And Joy mentions this totally terrifying scenario called the gray goo problem, which was thought up by Eric Drexler. Basically, what if those nanobots just start replicating out of control and consume all matter on Earth?
Okay, that's definitely nightmare material.
Right. Turns the whole planet into this lifeless gray goo.
It's definitely making me think about the ethics of all this.
Totally. Like, scientists and engineers, they have a massive responsibility here. I mean, just look at what happened with antibiotic resistance.
Right. We just used antibiotics like they were candy, and now we've got these superbugs that are basically immune to everything. It just shows that even with good intentions, things can go sideways fast.
That's actually why Joy argues for this idea of relinquishment, basically, limiting the development of certain types of knowledge to stop potential catastrophes.
Hold on, is he saying we should just give up on these technologies? Isn't that a little drastic? I mean, haven't we always pushed for progress, trying to see what's possible?
It's a pretty radical idea, I know, but Joy's argument is that if pursuing certain knowledge could mean our extinction, then we have to at least consider it.
Okay, I see what he's saying. But what kind of knowledge are we talking about here? Is he saying we should just ban all research on robotics or genetic engineering?
No, not necessarily. He actually uses examples from history, like when the US decided to stop developing biological weapons.
Oh, right. And that led to the Biological Weapons Convention and then the Chemical Weapons Convention, right?
Exactly. It shows that countries can actually agree to give up dangerous technologies if it's for the greater good.
So it's not about stopping progress. It's about choosing a different path that doesn't lead to, well, the end of the world. But can we really get everyone on board with something like this, especially with all the competition and money involved?
That's the million-dollar question. Even Joy admits it would be a huge challenge. Like, how do you make sure everyone's actually following the rules, especially with companies trying to protect their secrets and make money?
It definitely makes it way harder than if it was just governments involved.
Mm.
But with GNR, so much is happening in the private sector. It's not like you could just shut down a few labs and call it a day.
Yeah, it's tricky. It brings up questions about transparency, intellectual property, and how to balance individual rights with keeping everyone safe.
So if this relinquishment thing is so hard to pull off, what are our options? Do we just cross our fingers and hope for the best?
Well, hope's important, but it's not really a plan, is it? Joy's really pushing for open and honest conversations about the ethics of all this, and not just between scientists and engineers. He says everyone needs to be involved.
It's like we need a global wake-up call, right? We need to realize that our technology has gotten way ahead of our wisdom, and we need to catch up and fast.
And that wake-up call needs a major shift in how we think. Like, the Dalai Lama talks about moving away from always wanting more stuff and more power. He's all about compassion and seeing everyone as connected.
So maybe our definition of happiness is part of the problem, like always wanting more, more, more. Maybe that's actually leading us down a dangerous path.
Exactly. We need to find a different way to define progress, one that puts well-being first, one that's sustainable and maybe even a little humble when it comes to what we create.
So we've got relinquishment, which sounds really tough to actually do, and then this idea of a global change in how we think ethically, which honestly might be even harder. But before we jump into what we can do about it, I'm curious, does Joy offer any hope? Like, are there any good things that could come from these GNR technologies, or are we just headed for a dystopia?
You know what? Let's not give up on hope just yet. Joy actually explores some pretty cool utopian scenarios, too.
Okay, good. I definitely need a little optimism after all that doom and gloom. What kind of good stuff are we talking about?
Well, imagine a world where robots do all the work, so we don't have to. We could have so much free time, be creative, and have more than enough of everything.
That sounds pretty amazing. Sign me up for the robot butler service.
Yeah.
But hasn't there been a lot of talk about how this could lead to everyone losing their jobs?
Sure, there are worries about the transition. But this computer scientist, Danny Hillis, thinks we'll adapt. He says we had those same fears during the Industrial Revolution, but we figured it out.
So it's not about stopping progress, it's about managing it, right?
Yeah.
Making sure everyone benefits.
Exactly. And then there's genetic engineering. Imagine curing diseases, living longer, and even enhancing what our bodies can do.
Like no more cancer or Alzheimer's, living healthy for, like, hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now that's a future I'm into. And what about nanotechnology? What good could come from that?
Nanotechnology has huge potential. We could fix the environment, have cheap and abundant energy, and even have more than enough materials for everyone. Imagine repairing all the damage we've done to the planet.
Wow. So it really is like we're standing at a crossroads, right?
Right.
One path leads to fear and destruction, and the other leads to hope and working together. The big question is, which path will we choose?
And that's exactly what we're going to explore more when we get back. Welcome back. We were just talking about all those amazing utopian possibilities before the break. A world without disease or having to work, with tons of resources for everyone, and where humans can reach their full potential. Sounds pretty awesome, right?
It does, but to be honest, I'm still kind of stuck on those dystopian scenarios we talked about, like the robots taking over and knowledge becoming a weapon. It's kind of hard to shake that feeling of dread. It feels like every solution just brings a whole new set of problems.
I totally get it. It's a lot to wrap your head around. And it just shows how important it is to plan carefully and have some ethical guidelines in place as we explore these new technologies. We really need to be having these conversations now before things get out of hand.
So it's not about being against technology. It's about making sure it actually benefits humanity, right?
Exactly. And that brings us back to Bill Joy and his idea of relinquishment. I know it sounds extreme, but considering what's at stake, it's definitely worth thinking about seriously.
Okay, let's break this down a bit more. I get the idea of limiting certain types of knowledge, But how would that actually work in real life?
Joy brings up examples like the Biological Weapons Convention. Countries realized how dangerous bioweapons could be and decided together to stop developing them.
But bioweapons were mostly a military thing, right? GNR has so much potential to make money. How do you get companies to agree to relinquishment when they're all competing to profit from these new inventions?
That's one of the biggest challenges for sure. Joy suggests maybe we need new systems to check up on things, kind of like what we have for nuclear weapons, but on a much larger scale.
So are we talking about, like, international inspectors going into labs and factories to make sure no one's secretly working on stuff they're not supposed to?
It's a possibility, but of course then you have to worry about people stealing ideas, corporate espionage, and countries getting upset about their sovereignty.
It almost sounds like we'd need some kind of global government to enforce these agreements. Is that what Joy is suggesting?
He doesn't actually come out and say we need a world government, but he does say that relinquishment would require a level of global cooperation and trust that, well, let's be honest, we haven't really seen yet.
So maybe relinquishment is more of a long-term goal than something we can do right now. It's a great idea, but the reality seems pretty complicated.
It's definitely a long shot, but that doesn't mean it's not worth trying. Even if we don't get to complete relinquishment, just talking about it can help us identify the most dangerous areas of GNR and figure out where we need the most oversight.
Okay, so even a partial relinquishment would be a step in the right direction. But let's be real. Getting countries and companies to agree to limit what they're doing with technology, especially when there's so much money involved, seems like a pretty tall order.
It's a huge challenge, no doubt, but history has shown us that even things that seem impossible can happen when enough people believe in them.
So what we need is to get people talking about this, right? A global movement demanding that our leaders put human safety above technological advancement, like a humanity first movement or something.
That kind of grassroots pressure could definitely make a difference. Remember, even Joy himself seems to have had this kind of awakening. He went from being a total tech optimist to someone deeply worried about the potential downsides of what he was creating. He's using his platform to start a conversation, and that's a good first step.
And that's what's so powerful about his article. He's not just pointing out the dangers, he's challenging us to rethink our values, what we consider progress, and what it means to be human in this age of crazy technological advancements.
He even talks about utopia. Not the techno-utopia that some futurists imagine, but a utopia based on human connection, compassion, and understanding what truly brings happiness.
So instead of trying to live forever through technology, maybe we should focus on creating a world where people feel valued, connected, and like their lives have meaning, where we prioritize well-being over endless economic growth and the pursuit of knowledge just for the sake of it.
Joy talks about this guy, Jacques Attali, who says that throughout history, our ideas of utopia have changed. First, we wanted to achieve eternity through religion, then freedom through democracy, and then equality through social justice. He proposes a fourth utopia called fraternity, based on altruism and recognizing that we're all interconnected.
That's a really beautiful idea, and it feels especially relevant now with the world becoming more and more divided by technology, wealth, and ideology.
It suggests that true progress isn't about conquering nature or trying to be more than human. It's about recognizing that we're all vulnerable, connected, and responsible for each other and the planet.
It's a reminder that the future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create through the choices we make, the actions we take, and the values we hold.
Exactly. But before we get too carried away with utopian dreams, let's bring it back down to earth for a minute. What are some practical things we can do as individuals and as a society to navigate this uncharted territory? Because let's be honest, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and helpless when you think about these technologies that could change the world so drastically.
I totally agree. We can't just ignore it and hope for the best. So what can we do? Where do we even start?
Joy really emphasizes being vigilant and taking personal responsibility, especially for scientists and engineers who are at the forefront of developing these technologies. He talks about a code of ethics, kind of like the Hippocratic Oath for doctors, that puts human well-being above everything else.
So it's about making sure the people who are building these technologies have a strong sense of morality. But what about the rest of us? What can we do?
For one thing, we can educate ourselves about these issues. The more we understand the potential risks and benefits of GNR technologies, the better prepared we'll be to have informed discussions and demand responsible development.
So read books, Listen to podcasts like this one, talk to friends and family. Basically, don't let this topic just stay in the realm of science fiction or academic journals. Bring it into everyday conversations.
Exactly. We need to make these conversations mainstream. We can also support organizations that are working to raise awareness about the ethical implications of these new technologies.
Right. There are groups out there pushing for responsible innovation, stronger regulations, and holding corporations accountable for their actions.
And don't underestimate the power of political action. Contact your elected officials and let them know you care about these issues. Demand that they put human safety and well-being ahead of short-term profits and technological dominance.
And we can vote with our wallets too. We can support companies that are committed to ethical and sustainable practices.
And finally, remember that even small individual choices can make a difference. The technologies we use, the products we buy, the way we live our lives, all these choices have an impact.
From being mindful consumers and making conscious decisions about how we engage with technology, these are all important steps, even if they seem small. Think globally, act locally, right?
Exactly. And remember, the future isn't set in stone. We have the power to shape it, but only if we choose to get involved.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We talk about self-replicating technologies, dystopian scenarios, the possibility of relinquishment, the need for a global shift in ethics, and the importance of individual action. It's been quite a journey. But before we wrap up, I'm curious about something Bill Joy mentions towards the end of his article. He talks about the need to redefine our concept of happiness. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a really important point, and I think it gets to the core of the problem we're facing. For centuries, Western society has linked happiness with material wealth, technological progress, and conquering nature. It's a story that's deeply embedded in our culture.
It's that bigger, better, faster mentality that has led to some amazing innovations, but it's also caused some serious problems like climate change, social inequality, and now these potential existential threats from GNR technologies. Maybe it's time to rewrite that story.
Exactly. Joy, along with thinkers like the Dalai Lama and Jacques Attali, are urging us to do just that. They're saying true happiness doesn't come from having more stuff or pushing the limits of knowledge. It comes from inner peace, compassion, and feeling connected to something bigger than ourselves.
It's a big shift in perspective, and I think a lot of people are struggling with it. We've been taught that happiness is something we achieve through external things like buying a bigger house, getting a promotion, or having the latest gadgets.
And yet, all the evidence points to those things not bringing lasting happiness. So we have to ask ourselves, what does? What are those alternative paths to utopia that Joy and others are suggesting?
That's a big question, and I'm sure the answer is different for everyone. But are there any common threads, any shared principles that can guide us toward a more fulfilling and sustainable way of life?
There are definitely some recurring themes: a sense of purpose, meaningful relationships, a connection to nature, a feeling of belonging, and living in accordance with your values.
So it's not about rejecting technology or progress altogether. It's about being more intentional about how we use technology, choosing technologies that support our well-being, and recognizing that true progress is ultimately about becoming more fully human, not trying to transcend our humanity.
Well said. And that message is especially important now as we enter this new technological era.
Absolutely. But before we get too philosophical, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll explore some of the specific challenges and opportunities that lie ahead as we navigate this brave new world of GNR technologies. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the show. We've been on this incredible journey, exploring what the future holds for humanity. We've gone from scenarios that are downright terrifying to possibilities that are truly inspiring. And it all comes back to these super powerful technologies: robotics, genetic engineering, and nanotech, the ones that can just keep replicating themselves.
Yeah, and we've really dug deep into some big questions, like Bill Joy's idea of relinquishing certain types of knowledge, the need for a global shift in ethics, and even redefining what happiness means in this rapidly changing world.
It's definitely a lot to absorb, but it feels incredibly important. Like we're standing on the edge of something massive, and we need to figure out what to do next. So how can we ensure that these technologies are used for good? How do we prevent them from becoming something we regret? Well, one crucial aspect is to create a culture of transparency and accountability, particularly within the scientific and engineering communities.
That makes sense, especially if we're talking about relinquishing certain dangerous technologies or setting boundaries. We need to be able to trust that those limits are being respected, right?
Exactly. And that requires a level of openness that hasn't always been there, particularly when it comes to research with potential military applications.
Joy uses the example of the Manhattan Project, where scientists were sworn to secrecy even when they had concerns about the consequences of their work.
Right. And with GNR technologies, where so much development is happening in the private sector, transparency becomes even more crucial. We can't have corporations secretly pursuing potentially dangerous research without any public oversight.
So how do we shine a light on all this? Is it about government regulations, international treaties, or something else entirely?
It'll probably require a multifaceted approach, definitely stronger regulations, but also a shift in how both scientists and the broader culture view these advancements.
So it's not just about making new laws. It's about changing how we think about knowledge, progress, and responsibility.
Exactly. We need to move away from the idea that knowledge is always good, no matter the consequences. We need a more nuanced view that acknowledges the potential for misuse and unintended harm.
It's like that saying, with great power comes great responsibility. We're acquiring these incredibly powerful technologies, but are we ready to use them responsibly?
That's the fundamental question, and I think part of the answer lies in humility. Recognizing that we don't have all the answers, we can't predict every outcome, and caution is absolutely essential when dealing with technologies that could fundamentally change life as we know it.
Humility, transparency, accountability. These are all essential guiding principles,
Mhm.
but they seem a bit abstract. What are some tangible steps we can take to ensure the responsible development and use of GNR technologies?
One practical step is to establish independent ethical review boards for any research and development involving GNR.
Sort of like the institutional review boards, IRBs, that oversee research with human subjects.
Exactly. These boards would be made up of experts from different fields: scientists, engineers, ethicists, social scientists, and members of the public.
So they would evaluate the potential risks and benefits of the research, make sure it's conducted ethically, and recommend safety measures to prevent potential harm.
That's right. And importantly, they would also have the authority to stop any research that's considered too dangerous or unethical.
That seems like a solid first step. But how do we address the global nature of these technologies? How can we ensure that ethical guidelines and regulations are enforced on an international level?
That's a huge challenge. We need to strengthen existing international agreements, like a biological weapons convention, and create new ones specifically for the challenges posed by GNR technologies.
So we're talking about global treaties that ban certain types of research or set strict limits on development.
Exactly. And these treaties would need strong verification mechanisms to make sure all countries are honoring their commitments.
Which brings us right back to the issue of transparency.
Absolutely. Finding the right balance between national security and intellectual property protection while ensuring openness and accountability will be crucial.
It's a complex puzzle, but one we need to solve if we want to prevent these powerful technologies from being turned against us.
And we also need to think about the long-term implications. It's easy to get caught up in the immediate risks and benefits, but
We need to consider the world we're creating for future
Mhm.
generations, right?
Exactly. Once these technologies are out there, we can't just put them back in the box. So we have to think about the social, economic, and environmental consequences of GNR technologies, not just for today, but for decades and even centuries to come.
It's not just about avoiding disaster. It's about proactively shaping a future we can all be proud of, where technology truly serves humanity.
Well said. That's the ultimate challenge and the ultimate opportunity we have before us.
This deep dive has been truly eye-opening. But, as we've learned, the conversation doesn't end here.
Bill Joy reminds us that the decisions we make today will determine the course of human history for generations to come.
So, keep exploring these issues, keep talking about them, and demand that our leaders make wise and compassionate choices as we enter this new era. The future isn't predetermined. It's something we create together. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep imagining a better future for everyone.